Have you ever wondered how a group of soldiers in shining armor could shape an entire nation's economy? What if I told you that the King's Life Guards, those stoic sentinels guarding the royal palaces, have a profound impact on both the UK's tourism industry and its financial landscape? You're about to discover how these iconic guards, often seen as a symbol of British tradition, are quietly driving millions of dollars in revenue, while maintaining a historical legacy that continues to fascinate visitors from all over the world. But here's the twist. It's not just about their military precision or royal status. It's about how they've evolved into a powerful tourist magnet and an essential pillar of the UK's economy. So, stick around, because what you're about to learn may completely change the way you look at the British monarchy and its hidden financial empire. When you think of the UK's tourist attractions, what comes to mind? Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, the Tower of London, and of course, the iconic King's Life Guards. But did you know that these soldiers are more than just a striking symbol of British tradition? They are a tourism powerhouse in their own right. Every year, millions of tourists flock to the UK, not just for the historical sites, but to witness the changing of the Guard, a ritual so popular that it's practically become a spectacle. But let's break it down. It's not just the royal spectacle that draws people in. It's the story, the pageantry, the sense that you're witnessing something timeless, almost magical. And the fact that this show is free to watch. That's a major draw for visitors, especially in a world where many top attractions come with a hefty price tag. In fact, the King's Life Guards play a key role in fueling the UK's tourism industry, which is worth billions. Think about it. Every time a tourist steps foot near Horse Guards Parade, they're not just observing history, they're spending money. From transportation and accommodations to souvenirs and guided tours, the ripple effect is immense. And it doesn't stop there. Visitors from all over the world bring in major spending power, keeping shops bustling, hotels full, and restaurants packed with eager customers. Let's put some numbers on it. A report by the Visit Britain Tourism Board suggests that tourism in the UK contributes about £28 billion to the economy annually. And guess what? A significant chunk of that comes from visitors who are specifically drawn to the royal experience. And that's where the King's Life Guards come in. But here's where it gets interesting. It's not just about the visitors who show up for the changing of the guard. These guards are viral content creators without even realizing it. Every time a video goes viral, that's another boost to the tourism economy, driving even more people to the UK to see them in person. You might be thinking, okay, the King's Life Guards are iconic, but how much money are they actually generating for the UK? Well, let's dive into some fascinating details that might surprise you. These royal soldiers are more than just a pretty sight in their red coats and black bearskin hats. They're a financial force that keeps the UK's economy buzzing. First off, let's talk about tourism spending. We've already touched on how people come from across the globe to see the King's Life Guards, but let's break it down a little further. The average tourist spends a significant amount of money just to be in London. From transportation to accommodations, a simple trip to see the Guards ends up generating millions of pounds for local businesses. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just the tourists who watch the changing of the Guard and snap a few pictures. The King's Life Guards influence the decisions of those coming to the UK for longer stays or even for business. They add an element of tradition and prestige that attracts high-end tourists, the kind that spends big. Hotels near St James's Park and Horse Guards Parade regularly see luxury bookings because of the unique experience these guards provide. Think about it. Where else in the world can you find such an authentic royal spectacle? That's worth a pretty penny. Now consider all the local businesses thriving, thanks to the constant influx of visitors. Coffee shops, souvenir stalls, and high-end boutiques in the vicinity of Buckingham Palace, Horse Guards Parade, and the Mall are inundated with tourists all year round. The presence of the King's Life Guards makes these areas some of the most profitable locations for entrepreneurs in the UK. To top it all off, the sheer global appeal of the British monarchy and its guards has turned the UK into a global brand. The King's Life Guards are, in a sense, a marketing tool that brings tourists and their wallets right to the doorstep of London. Every photo and video posted on social media is like a mini advertisement for the UK tourism industry, driving even more people to witness the spectacle in person. And don't forget about the souvenirs. From keychains to high-end collectibles, everything related to the King's Life Guards has a price tag. This market alone is worth millions annually. Imagine the sales from people snapping up memorabilia just to remember their time in London. This is money flowing into the UK economy simply because these guards represent a living, breathing piece of history that people are eager to take home. By now, we know that the King's Life Guards are a massive tourism and economic asset to the UK. But let's pause for a moment and ask a question that might be lingering in your mind. How much does it actually cost to maintain these legendary guards? The first thing to understand is that these guards aren't just soldiers in fancy uniforms. They are highly trained professionals who provide a level of security and ceremonial duty that is integral to the British monarchy. And like any prestigious institution, keeping the King's Life Guards running smoothly requires substantial investment. But when you think about it, the costs are just a tiny fraction of what they bring back in terms of economic value. Let's break it down. The British Army has to fund everything from uniforms, which are custom-made and tailored to perfection, to training programs that prepare these soldiers for the intense physical and mental challenges they face. The cost of a uniform alone, with its iconic bearskin hat and red tunic, can easily exceed £1,500 per guard. And that's just one uniform. Multiply that by the number of guards on duty, and the cost of maintenance skyrockets. After all, wear and tear is inevitable, especially when these uniforms are subjected to constant public exposure. But it's not just the uniforms. The training for a King's Guard is grueling and extensive. They undergo months of military drills, ceremonial practices, and physical fitness tests, all of which require a hefty budget to execute. Imagine the cost of running military academies, paying instructors, and maintaining training facilities. Then, there's the additional cost of security training, since these guards aren't just standing around looking impressive, they are trained to protect royalty at all costs. And here's where it gets even more interesting. These aren't just any soldiers. The King's Life Guards are part of a royal tradition that has been maintained for centuries. This makes their continued existence a symbol of British heritage, which has a certain premium value. But unlike other government programs, the King's Life Guards are a living piece of history, blending tradition with modern security protocols, making them an invaluable asset. When you add in logistics, transportation costs, and all the support staff needed to maintain such a grand spectacle, the final tally can be quite high. But here's the thing. While the cost of maintaining these guards is substantial, the economic return they generate from tourism, media exposure, and brand recognition for the UK is in the millions, if not more. Every time a tourist buys a royal souvenir or books a tour around Buckingham Palace, part of that money goes directly into funding these traditions. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's money well spent. In the end, the King's Life Guards are more than just an expense. They are an investment in British culture, security, and of course, the UK's booming economy. So, we've learned a lot about the King's Life Guards today. From their massive impact on the UK's tourism industry to the economic powerhouse they represent, it's clear that these iconic soldiers are far more than just a royal tradition. They are a living investment, one that continues to bring in millions of pounds to the UK each year. But here's the big question. Are the King's Life Guards really worth the cost? Is it all worth the money spent on uniforms, training, and upkeep for what some might see as just a ceremonial tradition? Or are we looking at something that goes far beyond that, a symbol of the UK's heritage, security, and global appeal? Let's flip the coin for a moment. Imagine a world where the King's Life Guards no longer stood at attention. What would happen to the tourism flow? How many visitors would still come to London to see Buckingham Palace or Horse Guards Parade if the Royal Guards were a thing of the past? What impact would that have on the billions of pounds the UK earns from tourism? It's a lot to think about, right? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think that keeping the King's Life Guards is worth the cost for the UK? Or do you think it's time to move on and shift those funds into other areas? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this age-old tradition and how it fits into the modern world. Your opinions matter, and trust me, we'll be diving into these answers in the next video. So, go ahead, share your thoughts, and join the conversation.